In the middle of a raging blizzard, Officer Mark's headlights cut through the swirling snow. He wasn't expecting to find life out there until his patrol car skidded to a stop. Through the storm, a faint shadow appeared, a German shepherd, trembling, scarred, and half buried in the snow. But what froze Mark's breath wasn't the dog's wounds. It was what the dog was shielding beneath his body. Something small, fragile, alive. In that moment, duty turned into something far deeper. What the officer uncovered next would melt even the coldest heart. Stay until the end, because this story will remind you what loyalty and love truly mean. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The wind howled across the frozen highway like a living thing, clawing at everything in its path. Snowflakes swirled furiously under the glare of Officer Mark's headlights, dancing in chaotic spirals that made it nearly impossible to see 10 feet ahead. The temperature had plummeted below zero, and every few seconds his wipers struggled to push away sheets of ice forming on the windshield. It was one of those nights when even the sound of his radio felt distant, muffled by the storm's relentless roar. Mark's Yui, gloved hand tightened around the steering wheel as his police SUV crawled forward through the blizzard. He'd been on patrol for hours, answering distress calls about stranded motorists and abandoned vehicles. But this stretch of road was empty. His breath fogged the inside of his mask as he murmured, "No one should be out here tonight." The snow was falling faster now, burying tire tracks and erasing any sign of movement. The radio crackled suddenly, making him flinch. "All units, visibility is near zero. Stay within city perimeter unless responding to an active distress signal." Mark sighed. "Copy that." But something in his gut told him not to turn back. There was a strange pull, an instinct he couldn't explain that made him keep driving. A dim orange glow flickered in the distance, barely visible through the white curtain. He squinted, slowing down. It wasn't headlights, it looked smaller, flickering. A campfire? Impossible in this weather. He eased his SUV to the shoulder, engine humming softly, and stepped out into the storm. Instantly, the cold hit him like a wall. The wind cut through his uniform, biting into his skin. Snow whipped across his face, and within seconds his eyelashes froze. He raised his flashlight and scanned the road ahead. "Hello?" he called out, his voice almost lost to the howling wind. No response. Just the eerie emptiness of the storm. Then, through the blinding snow, he saw movement. A faint shadow dragging itself across the road before collapsing near a snowbank. Mark's pulse quickened. "Hey, are you hurt?" he shouted, rushing forward. But as he got closer, the shape became clearer, not human. His boots crunched through the snow until his flashlight beam fell upon it. A large German shepherd, lying motionless, half buried in white. Its fur was matted with frost, its chest rising and falling weakly. Mark's heart slammed in his chest. "Oh God," he whispered. He knelt beside the dog, snow piling around them, unaware that what he was about to discover would change his life forever. Mark's flashlight beam wavered as he fought against the wind, the storm's icy breath slapping his face with every step. The blizzard roared louder now, snowflakes slicing sideways like shards of glass. His boots sank deep with each movement, the snow swallowing the sound of his steps. "Hang on, buddy," he muttered, crouching lower beside the German shepherd. The dog's sides shuddered with shallow breaths, steam rising faintly from its body. Up close, the animal's condition was worse than he'd thought. Its fur was clumped with blood and ice, dark streaks running down its back where deep scars tore through the coat. The dog lifted its head weakly and let out a low guttural growl. Not aggressive, protective. Its eyes were sharp even through exhaustion, locked onto Mark's every move. Mark raised one hand slowly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." His voice was calm, the tone he used during tense rescues. He'd seen that look before, pure defense, not hostility. Whatever this dog had been through, trust had become a luxury. Still, something about its eyes caught him. They weren't filled with fear. They were filled with purpose. He scanned the snow around them. No tracks except his own. No sign of another person. Just an endless white expanse devouring everything. "Where did you come from?" he whispered, shining the light over the dog again. That's when he noticed something strange. Its body was curled unnaturally, as if shielding something beneath it. The shepherd let out a low whine when he tried to move closer, its gaze pleading, desperate. Easy, easy there, Mark said softly, crouching lower to the ground. The wind howled, rattling his breath. He angled the flashlight to the dog's chest and froze. A tiny paw twitched beneath the larger dog's body. Then another faint sound, a soft, trembling whimper. Mark's eyes widened. No way. Carefully, he brushed aside the blanket of snow, revealing a small, fragile puppy tucked tightly against the shepherd's belly. It was barely moving, its body shivering under the thin layer of fur. Mark's heart clenched. Despite her injuries, the older dog had used her own body to shield the pup from the cold, taking the full force of the storm. She had chosen to suffer so the little one could survive. He reached for his radio, fumbling with frozen fingers. Dispatch, this is Officer Mark. I've got a canine down, severely injured, and a puppy. Need animal rescue and backup immediately. Coordinates. The signal cracked, drowned by static. He cursed under his breath. The storm had knocked out transmission. Looking down, he saw the shepherd's eyelids flicker. She was fading fast, her breath slowing. No. Stay with me, he urged, his voice breaking through the wind. He took off his heavy jacket, wrapping it around both dogs, trying to shield them from the cold. The smaller pup stirred weakly, nestling deeper against her. For a moment, the world went silent except for the storm's mournful hum. Mark looked into the shepherd's weary eyes and whispered, You're a fighter, aren't you? He didn't know it yet, but that night, in the middle of a frozen wasteland, he'd just met the bravest soul he'd ever encounter. Mark crouched low, his flashlight trembling in his gloved hand as the beam skimmed over the shepherd's battered body. The storm raged around them, wind whipping through his uniform and stinging his eyes, but he didn't care. All his focus was on the injured animal lying before him. Snow clung to her fur like frostbite crystals, but beneath that, he could see the truth. Deep, jagged scars, some old and healed unevenly, others fresh and bleeding through her thick coat. Whoever or whatever had done this, it hadn't been kind. He swallowed hard, pressing a hand gently against her side. The dog flinched but didn't bite. Instead, she let out a soft whimper, low and pained as if her body had endured too much already. Mark's throat tightened. Easy, girl. It's okay. You're safe now, he whispered, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. But even as he spoke, he could feel the tension radiating from her. She wasn't lying here helpless. She was guarding something. Her front leg was draped protectively over the puppy. Her body curled in a half circle, blocking the baby from the storm. Every instinct she had was focused on shielding that fragile life, even as her own strength drained away. Mark felt something shift in his chest. He'd seen soldiers, survivors, even parents in the line of duty show that kind of determination, but never an animal in this condition. She was half frozen, bleeding and still refusing to move until she was sure her pup was safe. God, you're something else, he murmured, brushing the snow off her muzzle. Her amber eyes flickered open again, glassy yet defiant. There was no fear in them, only a quiet plea. Help the little one first. Mark scanned the surroundings, desperate for any sign of help. Nothing but white silence and the distant outline of his patrol car's flashing lights. The radio was useless. If he didn't act soon, both of them would freeze. He reached under his jacket, pulling out a thermal blanket from his emergency kit. The moment he tried to lift the puppy, the shepherd growled weakly. Not in aggression, but warning. I know, he said softly. I'll be careful. He tucked the trembling pup inside his jacket against his chest, feeling its faint heartbeat against his own. Then he turned back to the mother, pressing a steady hand over her fur. You're coming with me too, he promised, voice firm despite the cold burning his lungs. And as the blizzard howled on, he realized this was no ordinary rescue. This was a test of survival, loyalty, and the kind of love that doesn't need words to be understood. Mark's breath came out in ragged puffs as he crouched in the snow, his jacket wrapped tightly around the two fragile lives before him. The blizzard showed no mercy. Howling winds cut across the road, and the world had become a blur of white and gray. The shepherd's body trembled violently, her ribs rising and falling in shallow bursts. Mark could tell she was slipping away. He leaned closer, one hand gently resting on her side. Hang on, girl. Don't you dare give up now, he whispered, his voice breaking through the storm. Her eyes flickered open for a moment, filled with exhaustion yet fierce determination. She shifted slightly, enough for him to see that she was still trying to cover the puppy with what little warmth she had left. Mark reached beneath her body, feeling for the tiny form. The puppy was so small it could fit in his palm, its body trembling uncontrollably. He pressed it against his chest inside his uniform, tucking it beneath his thermal layers to share his body heat. "You're okay, little one," he murmured, barely able to hear his own words over the storm. "We've got you." The shepherd gave a faint whine as if acknowledging his action, her head lowering again. That simple sound, so weak yet filled with relief, hit Mark like a punch to the heart. She had been out here for who knows how long, wounded, starving and freezing, refusing to move because her pup needed her. He fumbled for his radio once more, pressing the transmit button with numb fingers. "Dispatch, this is Officer Mark. I have 2 canines in critical condition, 1 adult, 1 juvenile. I need animal control and medevac immediately." "Coordinates," the radio hissed, then fell silent again. Nothing but static. Mark's jaw tightened. Come on, he growled, smacking the device, but the storm had completely knocked out the signal. He looked down at the shepherd again. Her fur was coated with snow, her breathing uneven. He could feel her pulse weakening beneath his hand. Panic clawed at his chest. "All right," he said finally, voice firm with resolve. "We're not waiting for help. You're coming with me." He slid his arms beneath the dog, careful not to disturb her too much. She let out a pained whimper but didn't resist. Her weight pressed heavily against him. She was strong once, powerful, but now she felt fragile, like a shadow of the warrior she once was. The puppy stirred faintly inside his jacket, letting out a weak squeak. Mark gritted his teeth and began trudging through the storm toward his patrol SUV. Each step felt like walking through cement. The snow was waist-deep and his boots slipped on hidden patches of ice. But he refused to stop. The cold sliced through his body, his muscles burning with exhaustion, yet every time he looked down at the lifeless form in his arms, something stronger than fear pushed him forward. Finally, through the blur of white, the faint red and blue glow of his patrol lights emerged. He stumbled the last few feet, yanked the back door open, and carefully laid the shepherd across the seat. He turned up the heater to full blast, wrapping the emergency blanket around her body. The puppy whimpered again from inside his jacket, a sound so fragile it almost broke him. Mark reached out, brushing a hand gently over the shepherd's frost-bitten ear. "You're safe now," he said softly. "I promise." In that moment, as the storm raged outside the car, he realized something unexplainable. The dog wasn't just surviving for herself. She was holding on for that tiny heartbeat she'd protected with every ounce of her strength. And Mark silently vowed he would do the same. The SUV's engine roared against the wind as Mark slammed the door shut, trapping a pocket of heat inside. Snow rattled against the windows like tiny fists. He turned the temperature knob all the way up, watching warm air spill from the vents, fogging the glass. The shepherd lay sprawled across the back seat, motionless except for the faint rise and fall of her chest. Her fur, still wet and matted with blood, glistened under the flashing dashboard lights. Mark's hands shook as he shifted the puppy from his jacket and placed it gently in his lap, still cocooned in his scarf. The tiny creature whimpered softly, its body trembling uncontrollably. He tucked it closer to the heater, careful not to let the blast of air overwhelm it. "Stay with me, little one," he whispered. "You've come too far to quit now." He reached back and placed a trembling hand on the shepherd's side. "You too, girl. Don't give up on me." Her breathing was shallow, uneven. Each breath sounded like it took everything she had left. Without wasting another second, Mark threw the SUV into gear. The tires spun before finally catching traction, the vehicle jerking forward through the blinding snow. The road ahead was barely visible, just 2 dim lines swallowed by the whiteout. He kept one hand on the wheel and one eye on the rearview mirror, where the shepherd's reflection flickered between life and stillness. "Come on, hold on," he muttered, his voice trembling. His heart pounded so loud it drowned out the wail of the storm. The wipers screeched across the windshield, struggling to keep up. Every few seconds he'd glance at the puppy, still curled against the heater vent, its chest moving in tiny, uneven motions. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The GPS showed the nearest animal shelter 10 miles away, but in this weather it felt like 100. The roads were empty, no headlights, no life, just a blizzard swallowing the world whole. Mark's vision blurred for a second. Not from snow, but from tears he didn't expect. He had seen tragedy in his line of work, but something about this, a wounded mother, her helpless pup, and the impossible fight to stay alive, it hit him harder than anything else. As the SUV struggled over a snowbank, the shepherd let out a sudden sharp cry from the back seat. Mark's eyes shot up to the mirror. Her head had lifted slightly. She was awake. Her gaze darted immediately, not to him, but toward the small movement near the front seat. Toward her pup. Even in agony, her mother's instincts burned brighter than pain. Mark felt his throat tighten. "Yeah, I see you," he whispered, voice cracking. "She's okay. You did good, girl. You did so good." Finally, through the swirling storm, faint lights appeared ahead, the outline of the town's animal shelter. Relief hit him like a wave. He pressed harder on the accelerator, whispering a prayer into the storm. "Hang on, both of you. We're almost home." The wail of the storm trailed behind as Mark's SUV screeched into the parking lot of the town's small animal shelter. The headlights cut across a building barely visible under a blanket of snow. The sign that read Maple County Animal Rescue swung violently in the wind, one hinge broken. Mark jumped out, clutching his jacket tight against the cold, and sprinted toward the entrance. Inside, the air was frigid. The power was out. No hum of heaters, no flicker of lights. Only the faint glow of emergency candles cast trembling shadows across the reception area. A young volunteer, bundled in layers and holding a flashlight, looked up in shock. "Officer! You shouldn't be out in this storm." Mark didn't stop to explain. "I've got 2 dogs, and 1 adult, 1 pup in critical condition," he said, pushing through the doorway into the treatment room. The volunteer hurried after him, setting down her flashlight. Together they cleared a metal table, laying down old blankets and towels. He gently lifted the shepherd from the back seat, her body limp, fur still damp from the storm. The puppy stirred faintly inside his jacket. The volunteer's eyes widened. "Oh my God, what happened to her?" "She's been out there for a while," Mark said, voice tight. "She was shielding this little one from the cold. I need heat lamps, medical supplies, anything." The volunteer shook her head. "The generators failed an hour ago. We've been trying to get them running, but the storm—" "Then we improvise," Mark interrupted, already stripping off his gloves. He grabbed a stack of blankets from the corner and began rubbing the shepherd's body vigorously to generate friction heat. The volunteer followed suit, lighting more candles, placing them close enough for warmth but far from danger. The dog whimpered softly, her eyes fluttering open. Even weak, her gaze darted immediately toward the faint squeak from Mark's jacket. She tried to move, but he pressed a gentle hand to her shoulder. "Easy, she's safe," he said softly. "You did your part. Let us do ours." The puppy let out another fragile sound, and for the first time since the storm began, Mark felt a flicker of hope. Around them, the candle flames danced like tiny beacons in the dark, fragile, but fighting to stay alive, just like the souls they were trying to save. The storm had finally begun to fade by the time the shelter settled into a fragile calm. The candles flickered across metal tables and crates, casting trembling shadows on the walls. Mark sat cross-legged on the cold floor beside the German shepherd, gently drying her fur with a towel. Her breathing had steadied, still shallow but stronger than before. Every few seconds her ear would twitch toward the faint squeaks coming from a small box where the puppy now slept beneath a heat pad. The young volunteer, Mia, entered with a handheld scanner. "This might help," she said softly. "If she's chipped, we can find where she came from." Mark nodded, brushing a strand of wet hair from his forehead. "Let's try." Mia ran the scanner slowly over the dog's shoulder. A faint beep broke the silence. Mark's heart jumped. "She's got one," Mia said, squinting at the small display. "ID number 7843L. Wait," her expression shifted. This is registered to the police department." Mark froze. "What did you say?" Mia handed him the scanner. "She's a service canine. Name's Luna. Last entry says missing in action, we presumed deceased." For a moment the room seemed to stop. Mark stared at the battered dog lying before him, the scars suddenly telling a story he hadn't yet understood. "Luna," he murmured. "I've heard that name." He pulled out his phone and searched the department records. Within seconds, the screen filled with photos. A proud German shepherd sitting beside a smiling officer in uniform. Luna's eyes in the picture were the same, strong, alert, loyal. The caption read, "K9 Luna, partner to Officer James Cole, lost during pursuit 5 months ago. Mark felt a chill crawl down his spine that had nothing to do with the weather. He remembered the night Cole had been injured, a highway chase gone wrong, the patrol car crashing through a barrier. Cole had survived barely. Luna hadn't been found. Until now. Mia looked over his shoulder, her eyes wide. You mean she's been out there this whole time? In the wild? Mark nodded slowly. 5 months. Surviving alone. And she still risked everything to protect a puppy. His voice cracked slightly as he said it. He reached out, running a hand gently over her side. Beneath his palm, he could feel the rough ridges of healed wounds, each one a testament to something she had fought and endured. You're a survivor, he whispered. You didn't give up then, and you're not giving up now. Luna's eyes flickered open. For the first time, there was a faint recognition in her gaze, as if some part of her remembered what she once was. A protector, a hero. Mark's jaw tightened. You've been through hell, haven't you? He murmured. The dog exhaled softly, her body relaxing under his touch. And in that fragile silence, surrounded by melting snow and the soft hum of the heater, Mark realized something unshakable. Luna hadn't just been fighting to stay alive. She'd been fighting to keep hope alive. The shelter lights flickered weakly as Mark scrolled through Luna's old service records. Each photo, each report felt like pieces of a life torn away by fate. He stopped at one image, a training day years ago. Luna, strong and proud, standing tall beside Officer James Cole. The caption beneath read, Unbreakable bond, partners in every mission. Mark leaned back, his eyes fixed on the tired shepherd lying on the blanket. The flicker of the candlelight glinted in her half-open eyes. Maybe it was the exhaustion or the quiet around them, but suddenly Mark could see it. The life she once had. The world blurred, and in his mind, the sound of wind turned into sirens. A different night. A different storm. Luna sprinted through an alley, snow swirling behind her paws. Her handler, Officer Cole, followed close, shouting commands over the radio. Suspects heading toward the highway. Luna barked once, short, sharp, disciplined. She was fast, fearless, her breath steady even as the chase roared on. They reached the highway just as headlights blazed through the fog. Luna, wait, Cole shouted, but it was too late. The suspect's vehicle swerved, colliding with their patrol car. Metal screamed. Tires exploded. The world spun. The sound of shattering glass filled the air. When the smoke cleared, Cole was trapped inside, unconscious. The car door jammed. Flames licked at the edges of the wreck. Luna barked frantically, her paws clawing at the door handle, teeth gripping his sleeve, trying to pull him free. Her fur singed, her lungs filled with smoke, but she refused to back away. When help finally arrived, Cole was saved. But Luna had vanished. Some said she ran off in fear. Others said she'd been thrown clear and lost in the wilderness. The department searched for weeks, but there were no tracks, no sightings, just the ghost of a loyal partner gone missing in the snow. Mark blinked, the vision fading as the flickering candlelight returned. Luna stirred weakly beside him, letting out a faint groan. He brushed her ear gently, voice trembling. You never abandoned your duty, even when the world abandoned you. Outside, the last of the storm began to quiet, the wind dying down into a whisper. In that fragile silence, Mark finally understood. Those scars weren't just from survival. They were medals of loyalty. Proof of a soldier's heart that never stopped protecting no matter the pain. And now, she had done it again for a child not even her own. The night had grown quieter, but inside the shelter, tension still hung thick in the air. The storm had passed, yet the fight for survival wasn't over. Luna lay on the blanket, her breathing shallow but steady, while the small puppy, now resting in a makeshift incubator made of heat pads and towels, had grown still. Too still, Mark noticed at first. The faint rise and fall of the puppy's chest had stopped. His heart skipped. No, he whispered, rushing to the box. He scooped up the tiny creature, its limp body fitting easily into his palm. The volunteer Mia froze. Oh God, is it? Not yet. Mark cut her off, his voice sharp, urgent. He pressed 2 fingers gently against the puppy's chest. Nothing. No movement. No sound, just cold stillness. Panic surged through him like ice water. Come on, little one, he breathed, rubbing the pup's body to stimulate warmth. Still nothing. Mia grabbed a towel and helped him wrap the puppy tightly. You were just breathing. Don't stop now. Mark whispered, his throat tight. He'd seen death before, too many times, but this tiny life, so fragile and undeserving of such an end, hit him in a way he couldn't explain. Then, out of the silence, a faint whimper. Barely audible, but it was there. Mark froze, eyes wide. He pressed his ear close and heard it again. A soft, weak cry like a heartbeat learning to start again. "That's it," he said, relief flooding through his voice. "You're not done fighting, are you?" He rubbed the pup's chest gently with his fingertips, keeping it close to the heater. Its body twitched, and after a few agonizing seconds, a tiny breath escaped its mouth. It was alive. Faint but alive. Behind him, Luna stirred. Her head lifted weakly, eyes blinking open. Even in her pain, she sensed the change, the sound she'd been waiting for. Her gaze found the puppy in Mark's hands, and she let out a trembling, low whine, tail tapping once against the blanket. Mark turned toward her. "She's okay," he said softly, emotion thick in his throat. "You did it, Luna. She's still here." Luna's eyes softened, and she rested her head back down, her body finally easing for the first time since they found her. Mark placed the puppy beside her, wrapping them both in warm cloth. The tiny creature burrowed against its mother's chest, finding her heartbeat like a beacon in the cold. In that fragile moment, surrounded by flickering candlelight and silence, Mark realized he wasn't witnessing a rescue anymore. He was witnessing a miracle. The sky outside the shelter had turned to a pale silver gray as dawn crept slowly over the snow-covered town. The storm had finally died, leaving behind a world blanketed in silence. Inside, the air was warmer now. Faint hums of the generator filled the once dark room. Mark sat beside Luna, exhaustion heavy in his eyes, yet he refused to leave her side. The shepherd lay still on the blanket, her breathing faint but steady. Her fur, once stiff with ice, was now dry and soft under the dim light. The tiny puppy slept curled against her chest, its body rising and falling in a fragile rhythm that brought a flicker of peace to the room. Mark reached out, brushing his hand over Luna's head. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, meeting his gaze. They were weak, glassy, but alive. There was a message in that look, something raw and wordless. "Thank you, but take care of her if I can't." He swallowed hard, the lump in his throat too heavy to speak around. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. "I'll make sure she's safe. You have my word." His voice trembled with a quiet conviction. A single tear slipped down his cheek as he realized how unfair the world could be. A hero like her, scarred by battles no one saw, fighting for life when she should have been home, loved, honored. Yet even now she hadn't given up until her pup was safe. That was loyalty in its purest form. The first light of morning filtered through the frosted window, spilling across Luna's fur like gold. Her body rose once more with a shaky breath, then exhaled softly, her muscles relaxing. Her tail gave one last faint wag, not of fear or pain, but of peace. Mark bowed his head, his hand still resting on her. "Rest now, girl," he murmured. "You've done more than enough." The puppy whimpered faintly, nuzzling closer to her mother's still chest, unaware of the quiet passing. Mark wiped his eyes, steadying his voice. "You're not alone either, little one," he whispered. "I made her a promise, and I intend to keep it." Outside, the blizzard's chaos had ended, but inside that small shelter, a silent promise had just been made, one that would bind man and dog forever. The morning light poured through the shelter windows, soft and golden, painting long streaks across the floor. Mark stood near the doorway, watching as two paramedics carefully transferred Luna's body onto a stretcher. The tiny puppy, bundled in a towel, was tucked safely into his arms. He didn't say a word. He couldn't. His heart was still heavy from the night before, the image of Luna's final breath replaying endlessly in his mind. The ambulance rumbled through quiet streets, its siren echoing faintly across the snow-drenched town. Mark sat in the back, the puppy pressed against his chest, the small heartbeat fluttering like a fragile flame. Beside him, one of the paramedics spoke softly into a radio. "We've got one deceased canine, one juvenile, critical but stable. ETA 10 minutes to City Animal Hospital." When they arrived, the hospital lights felt blinding after the dim candle glow of the shelter. The smell of antiseptic and warm air filled the room. A team of veterinarians and assistants rushed toward them. "Bring them in," one called out. Mark followed, his boots squeaking against the linoleum floor. He laid the puppy gently onto a sterile table. She's been through a lot, he murmured, his voice hoarse. Lost her mother in the storm. But she's a fighter. The vet nodded, quickly examining the tiny creature. Hypothermia, mild frostbite, dehydration? But she's got a strong pulse. He turned to Mark. We can save her. Mark exhaled shakily, nodding. Do whatever it takes. Just then a nurse entered carrying Luna's stretcher. Sir, this one, she's not gone, Mark spun around. What? She still has a pulse, the nurse said breathlessly. It's weak, but it's there. He rushed to her side. Luna's chest moved faintly under the oxygen mask they'd placed on her. The vet didn't hesitate. Get her into surgery now! The next 30 minutes felt like an eternity. Mark paced the hallway outside the operating room, his hands trembling. He could hear the distant hum of machines, the clatter of instruments, the muffled voices of the medical team. Every sound made his heart pound harder. Finally, the door swung open. The lead surgeon stepped out, mask pulled down, his expression unreadable at first. Mark's breath caught, then the doctor smiled. She made it. Both of them. Mark's knees nearly gave out from relief. You're serious? She's not out of danger yet, the vet said, but she's strong. Whatever kept her alive out there, it's still in her. Mark pressed a hand to his chest, feeling that same ache. But this time it wasn't sorrow. It was hope. He looked through the glass window into the recovery room. Luna lay there breathing slowly, the puppy curled beside her. For the first time since the storm began, he let out a breath of gratitude. In a world that had nearly taken everything from them, they'd both been given a second chance. The city was quiet now. The storm reduced to a distant whisper against the hospital windows. In the dim glow of the recovery ward, Mark sat alone on a plastic chair beside Luna's kennel. The rhythmic beeping of her heart monitor filled the silence, steady and fragile like the ticking of time itself. He hadn't slept in nearly 24 hours. His uniform was still damp, his hands scraped and raw from the night's rescue. But he couldn't bring himself to leave. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the image of her lying in the snow, scarred, broken, and still protecting something so small it barely had a chance at life. The puppy stirred softly in the incubator beside Luna's bed. Its tiny movements made a faint rustling sound that seemed to echo in Mark's chest. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and exhaled slowly. You really did it, huh? He whispered to Luna. You saved her. You saved both of you. The faintest twitch flickered through her paw. Maybe she heard him. Or maybe it was just a reflex, he didn't know. But it was enough to make him smile through the exhaustion. For years, Mark had worn the badge proudly, serving the force with discipline and heart. But the job had taken its toll. He'd lost his partner 2 years earlier during a late-night pursuit, a memory that still haunted him like a scar he couldn't see. Since then, he'd worked his shifts quietly, dutifully, never letting emotion breach the surface until tonight. Looking at Luna, he felt something stir that he thought had died with his partner, that deep, wordless understanding of loyalty, the kind that didn't ask for recognition or reward, the kind that simply was. He stood, stretching stiff muscles, and walked to the window. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The first light of dawn painted the horizon gold. He turned back to the kennel, voice soft but sure. You fought through the storm. So will I. As the morning sun spilled into the room, Luna's chest rose a little higher. The puppy nestled closer. And for the first time in a long time, Officer Mark Hayes allowed himself to believe that maybe some souls were sent to remind the world what love and courage truly meant. When morning finally came, it arrived not with thunder or snow but with sunlight. Soft, golden rays spilling through the hospital blinds. The storm that had nearly claimed 2 lives had given way to a calm so still it almost felt sacred. Mark stirred awake in his chair, stiff from sleeping upright. His neck ached, but the first thing he did was glance toward the recovery room window. Luna was still there. She lay beneath clean white sheets, an IV tube running from her paw, her chest slowly rising and falling. The monitors beeped in steady rhythm, the sweetest sound Mark had heard in days. And nestled against her belly, wrapped in a small towel, was the tiny puppy fast asleep. He stood quietly, afraid to break the moment. The sunlight touched Luna's fur, giving her a faint golden glow. For a brief second, she looked like she was carved from light itself. Strong, beautiful, alive. A soft voice broke the silence. She's doing better, said Dr. Patel, the lead veterinarian, stepping into the room. He smiled, exhaustion lining his face. It's a miracle, really. The internal wounds were deep, but she held on. And the pup, she's responding beautifully to treatment. Mark exhaled, the breath trembling out of him. I thought we'd lost her, he said quietly. Dr. Patel nodded. Most would have. But she's not most dogs. He chuckled softly, glancing toward Luna. She refused anesthesia until we brought the puppy near. Her vitals stabilized only when she felt the little one beside her. It's as if she decided, I can't leave yet. Mark swallowed hard, his chest tightening. He stepped closer to the glass, his reflection merging with Luna's in the window. She's got more courage than half the force combined, he murmured. As if hearing him, Luna's eyes flickered open. Slowly, weakly, she lifted her head. For a moment, she looked disoriented, until her gaze found him. Recognition bloomed in her tired eyes. Her tail gave a faint, slow wag against the blanket. Mark pressed a hand to the glass, his throat tightening. Hey, girl, he whispered. You made it. Luna blinked, then turned her head toward her puppy, nudging it gently closer with her nose. The tiny creature squirmed, letting out a soft sound before settling against her. It was such a simple thing. A mother's instinct. A gesture of love. But in that sterile hospital room, it felt like witnessing a miracle unfold. Tears stung Mark's eyes as he whispered to himself. You didn't just survive the storm. You conquered it. Outside, the sun climbed higher, glinting off melting icicles. Inside, warmth returned, not just to the room, but to every heart that had fought through that night. 3 days later, the blizzard was just a memory. Melted snow glistened on rooftops and the world seemed to breathe again. The city animal hospital was quieter now, filled with soft barks and the rhythmic hum of machines. Luna had grown stronger each day, her wounds healing, her spirit returning. The puppy, now bright-eyed and playful, stayed curled beside her most of the time, occasionally tumbling over her mother's tail with a squeaky whine that made everyone smile. Mark visited every morning, always carrying coffee for the vet staff and treats for Luna. She'd lift her head the moment she heard his footsteps, her ears twitching, tail thumping softly against the sheets. But today something different was planned, and a visitor was coming. Someone from Luna's past. Dr. Patel approached with a file in hand. Officer Hayes, he said gently. We contacted her previous handler, a man named James Cole. Mark's eyes widened. Cole? Patel nodded. He's coming today. He was in rehab for a back injury. He said he never thought he'd see her again. Mark felt a lump in his throat. He remembered hearing about Cole years ago, a respected officer whose canine partner had vanished during a chase. He'd been crushed by the loss. An hour later, the automatic door slid open and a man in his late 40s stepped in, walking slowly with a cane. His face was pale, lined with pain and disbelief. Where is she? He asked softly. Mark guided him to the recovery room. The moment Cole saw Luna through the glass, he froze. His hand trembled as he reached for the door handle. Luna, he whispered. The dog's head lifted immediately. Her ears perked, eyes wide, as if some buried instinct had suddenly awakened. For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. Then Luna pushed herself up, wincing slightly but refusing to stop. Her tail began to wag faster and faster, her body trembling, not from weakness but joy. Cole stepped forward, tears streaming down his face. Hey, partner, he choked out. You found your way home. Luna pressed her nose into his palm, letting out a soft, broken whimper. The sound of recognition, of reunion, of love that had never faded. Mark turned away for a moment, swallowing hard, his chest tight with emotion. Dr. Patel smiled quietly. She remembered him. After all that time, she remembered. Cole knelt beside her, his hand resting on her scarred back. You never gave up, did you? You kept fighting. His eyes met Mark's. And you saved her. I can't thank you enough. Mark shook his head. She saved herself in her pup. I just happened to be there. Cole smiled faintly, then looked toward the puppy now climbing onto his shoe. Guess she's got her mother's spirit, he said, voice breaking. For the first time in years, Luna's world felt whole again. Her family, old and new, stood beside her, and the storm that once separated them had now bound their hearts forever. Weeks later, the snow had melted, giving way to green hills and sunlight that shimmered off the streets like a promise of new beginnings. The police department was buzzing with life that morning, But every conversation paused when Officer Mark Hayes walked in, carrying a small German Shepherd pup in his arms, bright-eyed, curious, wearing a tiny collar engraved with one word, hope. Behind him, Luna walked slowly but proudly, her scars still visible, yet somehow beautiful, symbols of survival, of love, of everything she had fought for. The department staff gathered near the entrance, their smiles warm and eyes wet as the once-lost K-9 returned to the place she had served so faithfully. Chief Reynolds stepped forward, his usually firm expression softening. "Officer Luna," he said, voice breaking slightly, "you've earned more than a commendation today." He placed a small medal around her neck, a gold emblem of honor engraved with, "For courage beyond duty." The room erupted in quiet applause, some officers wiping away tears. Luna stood tall, her tail wagging as the puppy beside her barked playfully, as if proud of her mother's moment. Cameras clicked, capturing the reunion, a story that had already spread across the community. People had donated, written letters, and even visited the shelter just to meet the dog who braved a blizzard to protect a child that wasn't even hers. After the ceremony, Mark took Luna and Hope outside. The afternoon sun bathed the station steps in golden light. He sat on the curb, Luna at his side, Hope tumbling in the grass in front of them. For a long time he said nothing, just watched them, feeling something deep and indescribable stirring in his chest. She wasn't just protecting a pup, a familiar voice said behind him. It was Officer Cole walking slowly with his cane. He smiled, eyes on Luna. She was protecting what she stands for: life, loyalty, hope. Mark nodded, glancing down at Luna, who rested her head gently against his knee. "She reminded me what it means to keep fighting. Even when everything's against you," Hope barked once, chasing a falling leaf across the pavement, and both men laughed softly. The world suddenly felt lighter, brighter. Mark looked out toward the horizon, the sunlight gleaming on Luna's fur. "You know," he said quietly, "in the coldest night of my life, she showed me what real courage looks like." He smiled down at Luna, and the tiny puppy now snuggled against her. "Turns out," he whispered, "what she was protecting wasn't just life. It was love itself." And in that moment, surrounded by warmth, peace, and the quiet heartbeat of hope, the storm finally ended.